Good morning and welcome to Puggy's Corner. This morning I have with me Bob Flint. He's the Executive Director of Springfield Regional Development Corporation. And he's going to talk to us a lot about what's happening, what might happen, and what hasn't happened. He's going to cover a lot of areas for us this morning. So first, Bob, I want to thank you for coming on to Puggy's Corner.
No, my pleasure. Happy holidays to you and your family.
And you too, Bob.
Thank you.
Now, Bob, I know that 99.9% of the people know who you are.
That may not be a good thing.
But that 0.1%,
sure.
Would you give them a little background to yourself so kind of familiarize them with who you are?
Yeah, so as you know, Chief, I'm a native of Springfield, grew up here, have had the good fortune of being involved in jobs that have been involved with the community, whether it was as the former operations manager, program director, morning show host, Cosmos play-by-play guy for WCFR for 14 years. I was the director of the Springfield Chamber of Commerce for 7 years, and I have been the director at SRDC for the past 7, almost 8 years now.
Great. So let's talk about SRDC. When was it formed, and who formed it, and why was it formed?
Yeah, so SRDC, and I'm sorry for the acronyms, is Springfield Regional Development Corporation. And we serve a few different purposes, but in terms of when we were formed actually 20 years ago through the efforts of several of the business people of the town at that time, Don Gurney, Rick Bibbins, and many others, that realized that in the aftermath of the main collapse of the machine tool industry, which really took place in the mid to late 80s, and I think maybe the triggering event was the abrupt bankruptcy of Idle Not Dairy, that they needed to do something. So they and other folks put up money and hired Al Moulton, who you would remember, and many out there hopefully still do. He passed away this past a year and a half ago. He was a legend in Vermont economic development circles, former commissioner of economic development, and really one of the main people in the state. He became the first director of SRDC. SRDC purchased the Idle Not property and transitioned it to what was then Vermont Country Foods. We'll talk about Idle Not in a second, because that building comes back now as Black River Produce. They were instrumental in bringing Hancore to town and doing some other things to sort of try and triage what was going on at the time. Since then, I am the fourth director of SRDC. Pat Moulton-Powden followed Al, and Carol Lighthall was between Pat and myself. And so we still serve that mission of trying to make things happen for Springfield, but also the other communities in our region. We have the same service area as the Southern Windsor County Regional Planning Commission, so 10 towns, 6 municipalities. And we also are the designated RDC, or Regional Development Corporation, for this part of Vermont. Okay. So for that, we contract with the state to be their basically conduit for economic development products and services. So it's our task to work with businesses, the major ones in the area, as well as those looking to start businesses, as well as to help make properties available and to facilitate commercial development. And we'll talk about all of that here, I think, over the course of this program. So we're not a state agency, we're a private nonprofit. We do have members that govern the organization. We do receive funding from several of the municipalities, including Town of Springfield, certainly. We receive funding from those businesses that are members. We receive funding from the state. And we try to basically make things happen in the area.
Okay. Now, when was it incorporated?
1992, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So how many towns make up your board, the board?
So we have a board of, if we count ex officios, 8 at the moment, and I'm doing this on the fly. So we have representatives from Chester, we have West Windsor, we have Springfield, we have Ludlow, 2 from Springfield, and I'm missing somebody. But we try to have regional representation for most of the communities in the region.
Now you said Springfield does have representation.
Yeah, Doug Gurney, who's the board chair, is obviously a Springfield person.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have
Christy Morris from the Select Board is also on the SRDC board.
Now, what would be the total budget for SRDC?
So our operating budget is roughly $225,000 to $230,000 a year.
Okay. And out of that $230,000 or $200,000, $30,000 of that comes from Springfield.
Correct.
And I guess some of the questions that were asked by the citizens, they want to know, what does that do for Springfield at $30,000? Does it help out in helping new businesses locate, or is it used to as a maintenance part of the budget? Or
well, I mean, it funds our operations.
Okay.
I mean, if the town of Springfield were to ever fund their own economic development staff,
yeah,
between the 30,000 that we get, and I think Springfield on the Move still gets 20,000 perhaps,
yes,
and
yeah.
those are the same amounts it's been for 20 years. And that's another discussion. But if you were to fund those operations as town entities, that cost would be at least triple, if not more.
Wow.
So for that 30,000, you're getting a full-time economic development effort in the town. At least from on the SRDC side, you're obviously getting a downtown effort on the part of Springfield on the Move. So, so yeah, we do all of the above. We own property in town. The taxes that we actually pay back are more than double what we receive from the town. And hopefully we've been effective in trying to make some things happen. You know, the big projects, we'll talk about 100 River Street, we'll talk about J&L, all that. Those are sort of the big, visible things. But there's any number of onesie, twosie businesses we work with, or folks looking to start businesses that I can't talk about because those are confidential, but we try to help as well. So we're hopefully helping to make things happen. Right. I think Springfield is sort of at the cusp of changing from being the reactive mode to beginning to be in the proactive, what do we want to be and how do we make it happen mode, which is starting to get interesting.
Good, good. Well, I think that answers a question for citizens out there that asked the question.
So there's two pieces, sorry, Puggy, I forgot about that I should mention. So within our office as well, so we have a staff of 3 full-time people, a couple of them are part-time, but 3 FTEs. Because of our designation as the state RDC, we also have a small business development center within our office that provides free counseling services and workshops, again, to small businesses or those looking to start a business. And we also have Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center's regional office as part of us, as is what's called the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or in English, helping businesses get government contracts. Okay. So we have people that work in our office that specialize in all of those areas. That are reaching out as well to businesses in Springfield and around the region.
I don't think a lot of people knew that.
Yeah.
That's good. So let's talk about the J&L building.
Sure.
That's been kind of a long going...
Tell me about it.
So what's happening? I mean, are you about ready to do whatever you have to do down there? Or?
We're getting there, and it's a frustrating piece of property. And as someone who grew up with the shops here, believe me, I get that as much as anybody else. Sure. So SRDC has owned the J&L property since the bankruptcy of Goldman Industrial Group 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about the NBC part of the building in a second. We no longer own that. Right.
Folks
in the area will have noticed this past year we cut down the ivy because we were sick of it looking the way it looked. There's a sign that's up there now with an Era logo on it, and it says to call me for more information. And we've started to chip away at the cleanup of, we use the term brownfield, basically the contamination that's on that property. Of the brownfields in the state of Vermont, that's easily the most complicated, both in terms of the magnitude of contamination as well as the different contaminants that are on the property. It is far more complicated than, say, 100 River Street or the Old Fellows building, as well as being about probably double the amount that's there. So throw into the mix that there's some litigation involving some of the material that's coming from another piece of property across Clinton Street. It really is complicated. So, and unfortunately, I can't just snap my fingers and make it happen. There's also some historic preservation constraints currently. So, on the positive side, how we say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So, we did a significant amount of asbestos cleanup this past year in the part of the building towards what's now the rec center, the fire station side. And we also did this in September, pumping out some liquid or product that had collected in the underground vaults, more in the middle part of the building. We are about to put out to bid $600,000 worth of work that will primarily take care of the removal of the former chip shed. The locals will remember that there was railroad tracks. There were railroad tracks that ran behind the building, and material was dumped and put on and stuff, and all the old shops have chip sheds. That material that came from those is not good, and it has gotten into the ground. So the removal of that building and the soils that surround that building is expensive. So that work, there's also a whole lot of regulatory nonsense that goes along with it, which we just signed off on for the third time last week. So we're waiting approval from EPA on the scope of work, and we received, you may remember pictures of in the paper about us receiving a check from the governor for $200,000. So that's part of the 600 I mentioned, and that work will be going on next spring. So that's going to deal with a significant amount, but not all of the contamination. And we sort of are continuing to work on the various other pieces and things sort of out of our control, such as litigation, before we can really do what I want to do with the whole thing.
So if you had to look in your crystal ball at this time, if you're looking in front of you there, how long before we can see maybe something really
Well, my answer may change on the day. You know, if you'd asked me a few months ago for reasons I'm not going to talk about publicly, I was optimistic and thinking that next spring might be big day, let's knock down J&L. I'm not going to say that now. I'll keep my fingers crossed and hope for the best. It would be nice to move more aggressively than we can move, but our hands are tied on some of the bigger pieces.
Okay. So let's talk about the south end of that building, and that's where the NBC was.
Right.
Now, I understand that that's up for sale, bankruptcy, or?
Well, we got to be careful, because that started the rumor mill going a couple weeks ago. So, as hopefully people know, NBC Solid Surfaces was there for many years. In fact, SRDC sold that part of the building. The property line actually goes 80 feet north into J&L 1. That was sold in 2002 to NBC Solid Surfaces. NBC ran for many years as a successful company, and then was having difficulties the last couple of years. So we worked with the company to try to keep them in business. Ultimately, unfortunately, that was not successful, and they closed March of this year. And then we worked with what's now Artisan Surfaces, which is a similar type of company that's based in Massachusetts. They've expanded their operations to Springfield, and they are doing composite countertops and other types of surfaces, solid surface countertops, out of that space. So when they came to be, when all of this happened in May, they purchased the business assets of NBC. And again, I'm in a public thing, so I got to be a little respect confidentiality. But they have the business. The real estate was held by a different corporation, different set of banks involved. So that process has continued concurrently into foreclosure. Foreclosure has led now to auction. So you would have seen a sign that was up a couple weeks ago that said auction January 30th, and my phone started ringing, Artisan Surfaces' phone started ringing, and people were understandably concerned and saying, oh boy, here we go again, another company going out of business. No, that is not the case. Artisan Surfaces is doing pretty well, actually. Ray St. Gelais, who's the owner, has been very good and good to his word, and they've got folks working back there, and they are they're doing pretty well. Maybe they end up owning the building. I don't know. And it's maybe as much as I want to say publicly at the moment. But you notice the auction sign is no longer up.
Okay, I gotta say
because of concerns about its impact on the business.
Right.
But the auction is still scheduled, as we're taping this, for January 30th.
Yeah.
And we are 30th.
30th. Yeah.
And we are involved in discussions with the various parties about that.
Okay. Let's hope that you can salvage it and keep it there and keep that business in it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Is there still some lawsuits against this contamination that you talk about?
Right. So now we're back on J&L 1.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's still the same building. It's just going north of it.
It's different properties.
Yeah.
Though.
Okay.
Different properties. So yes, there is still litigation emanating from. The state has an enforcement action against what's now a gas station across the street. Historically, you know, that was a manufactured gas plant. There appears to be product that is going under Clinton Street onto J&L 1 coal tar. That's many feet underground. So that's part of the contamination allegedly on J&L 1. So the state has an enforcement action against those property owners. Those property owners have sued a variety of folks, including SRDC, and for a time, including the town. Town's no longer engaged in that, I believe. But the upshot is, until that's resolved, we're stymied in terms of being able to do significant demolition or really work on that part of the building. As you drive down Clinton Street, towards the interstate, there's a notch in the building about halfway. So the other side of that notch, between that and what's now the MBC property, is the portion of the building we're talking about where this material is, more towards the notch end of that.
Okay, all right.
Several feet underground.
So that's going to be probably a long process before we can get that settled.
It's been a long process.
Yeah.
And again, as I said earlier, it depends on the day.
Yeah.
There are days when I think we're close, and there's days when we're not. So,
Okay, let's talk about the other property that you have with the Bryant building.
Sure.
Across the road. What's the status of that and what's happening there?
So whereas J&L is in the remediation stage, the cleanup stage, Bryant's is in the assessment stage.
Okay.
In other words, trying to identify what stuff is there. So a partial phase 2 assessment, it's called, was done earlier this year. The good news is it's not nearly as bad as J&L, and at first blush it's not nearly as bad as, say, Old Fellows. But it is contaminated. So we are currently working with EPA and the Southern Windsor County Regional Planning Commission to get additional assessment funds to continue that. I think we sort of take for granted on all the brownfields that the assessments and all that just happen, but there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that have gone into this community to fund the study of all these things, and you have to study them and have to go through the formal EPA process to get funding to clean them up, which is really frustrating and really slow sometimes, but that's the game you got to play. So so while that's going on with Bryant from the environmental point of view, we are also, it's a building that's not heated and hasn't been heated in a few years. So we did a structural engineering analysis of the building. Most of it is in decent shape, but we got to shore up the roof in a couple spots, so we're currently working with a contractor to get that done here fairly soon. We are evaluating whether the entire building should stay as it's currently configured, or maybe small parts of it may not be there, but we need to get additional environmental information to sort of tie the two together. So if there's a bad spot, and it's a spot that really is maybe not essential to the building, maybe it makes more sense to have that go away. We know the south end, which is the end towards the interstate, is in excellent shape and probably could be brought online quicker than the other. The thing that makes Bryant's problematic is that previous ownership stripped the building. So all the wiring is gone. All the infrastructure of the building is gone. So it's basically a shell. So we have to identify funding and a strategy for getting the building back online.
Why would they want to do that? I mean,
the value of scrap metal. I mean, J&L, we've been killed at J&L with vandalism. We probably have lost, oh goodness, a couple $100,000 anyway in copper and metals.
Gee, that's too bad. Okay, let's move up the road here just a little bit and go to River Street.
Okay.
The renovation's all done. I know it's being occupied at this time, and you're going to talk about the Great Hall. But is it fully renovated, or what's the status?
I mean, obviously the portions that are occupied are fully renovated. The big major project stuff is done. But the building will be renovated as they rent out space. You know, so there's, if you were to take a walk through, you would see there's places that still have to have concrete poured, and the infrastructure, the electrical, the HVAC, and all that stuff will be put into spaces as they're leased out. So, so the answer to your question is no, and it's not going to be until the building's fully occupied. So what's in there now is obviously the Springfield Health Center, which opened this fall. The walk-in portion of that will be coming, walk-in clinic portion of that will be coming early part of next year. Springfield Pharmacy is close to opening a branch just off the Great Hall, the middle thing. There'll be a small cafe that will be starting work shortly that will open first part of next year, early part of next year. And that's what we have at the moment. The developers have at the moment. You know, the Great Hall, excuse me, the Great Hall, which we referred to, has sort of turned out to be an interesting project in and of itself. So for people that haven't been in the building, that's about a 7,000 square foot space that used to tie two parts of the building together. All these machine shop buildings were built in chunks, whether it's J&L, Bryant's, or this. They were all built out as they needed more space over time. So the original part of Fellows is what we call the yellow building. As you drive down Pearl Street, you'll see there's a sign there that says Clay Shaper. It's a clay studio that's opened up in there, which is kind of neat. That's the original part dating back to 1896. Between that and what's now the back entrance of the building, the entrance to the Great Hall, there was all building there. And so we spoke about contamination a little while ago. The reason that building's not there is maybe that was some of the nastiest stuff at that site.
Right.
Was specifically, it was conduits many feet under concrete that had been greased to run wires. That grease was toxic.
Yeah, sure.
So, but that meant all the concrete had to go, and all the concrete had to be considered as hazardous waste. Money.
Yeah.
So anyways, from the very beginning, John Meekin, who's one of the two developers, along with Rick Genderson, I know they've been on the show before,
right.
had the idea of this great hall being a public space. And it's emerged as that, and thanks to the efforts of Nina Jameson, who's just been a saint. You go in there now and you see this really gorgeous artwork all along the walls. This is the second batch that's been in there. We had another group of artists that contributed art earlier this year. And so it's become public space for people to come from outside of Springfield to see the art and to see this magnificent building. And it is amazing to see the reaction of people that have an opinion of Springfield and then come and see this and realize something like this is taking place in Springfield.
Right.
You know, the first reception we had over 300, we had 125, 130 at the last one, many of which are from outside of the community, and again, they're stunned.
Wow.
So a byproduct of that has been a curiosity about, okay, we take for granted the shops. We knew what they were.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can't assume everybody else does.
Yeah.
So many of the retired machine shop folks, Don Whitney, Henry Swerzinski are two that come to mind, have been wonderful about donating their time to be basically docents for the space, but also talk about what that building used to be, as well as J and Ellen Bryant's. And so as you go in the left corner, I sort of am calling it History Corner, are this ever-growing set of artifacts from the shops.
That's right.
And you know, archival pictures and you know, certain things. And that was not the vision. But it's kind of neat that's turned into kind of like I said, a project unto itself.
Now, can you update us? There was talk when I had the two gentlemen on, they're probably going to have assisted living. And I guess they'd call it the bottom floor. I don't know if you call it the bottom floor.
Well, and it would be in another part of the building now, but they are working actively with two different parties that are interested in assisted living. And
so that's still going to be something they're going to be doing.
Nothing's done till it's done, you know, but that's still in the plans.
Yeah,
and they also intend to have a sit-down restaurant. And that's one of my kind of personal projects, is to find a way to make that happen in the curved area by the falls. The challenge with that, and we've met with several parties on that, and we have another one we're seeing shortly, is that's expensive to build that out. And will a restaurant of the caliber that you would have in that space, will it fly in Springfield?
Yeah, will it survive? Yeah.
And the people come and they say, boy, this is an amazing building, this is once in a million view and all of that, but will this community support this kind of restaurant? And obviously I think it will, and I think there's enough people in the, that just are craving, we have great restaurants now, so I'm not dissing any of the restaurants we have now, but there's, no pun intended, an appetite for having something else, and having something in that building would just be a home run.
Oh, yeah.
I think the other piece I'm involved in trying to figure out a way to make happen is trying to find a way to get live entertainment in the Great Hall. Having like a Friday night concert series or something like that. Not big rock bands or anything like that, but like a small quartet or some singers or something, casual.
That'd be nice. And how are you coming along on it? Have you succeeded in lining up anybody that might come in?
Well, it takes money, so the trick is, how do you find a way to pay for it? SRDC's been kind of subsidizing some of the stuff that's been going on there to date for the good of the order. That's got to stop at some point, and we've got to find a way to make the art be able to continue. We got to give Nina some assistance on that, and then the music would be a growth from the art.
Okay. Now, you're speaking of cost and this sort of thing. Some of this renovation covered by federal and state and town funds?
So there's no town money per se in the renovations. There's an asterisk to that, because the town of Springfield did receive a community development block grant through the Slums and Blight program that we facilitated for $750,000. That was passed through to the project and was spent on the life safety elements of it. They had to match that dollar for dollar. So, and that was reimbursed after they spent the money. So they weren't just given a check. They had to pay it and then show documentation and so forth. So technically that's federal money. The health center portion of the project does have some funding in that, thanks to Senator Sanders. And then all the well, not all the brownfields money, but a lot of the brownfields, probably a little more than half, was a combination of state and federal brownfields monies. So all in all, the amount of public money in the whole project, I would guess if it's a $13 million project, and it's probably more than that at this point, off the top of my head doing the math, I would say it's about a third.
A third of that comes from
public.
And then the poor investors had to come up with the rest.
Well, and then they're obviously being financed and stuff too.
I know, but they had to come up with the rest. And the feds out.
Yeah, less than half. I would say a third to a half.
Third to a half, okay. Now, there's a dam located right next to 100 River Street.
Right.
Two questions that's being asked. Number one, is it functional and working? And if so, is it producing enough electricity where they have to sell it back to Green Mountain Power now, CVPS? And who owns that dam?
So the developers own that dam. 100 River Street owns that dam. And it is going through, it just actually, I think, just got approval from FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to be licensed to run again. And next step is they've been doing some work on it, but they need to do a little bit more to get it up and running. So at the moment, there's not a power purchase agreement. At the moment, it's not purchasing, it's not producing electricity.
But the penstocks are still there and everything's ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's old.
Yeah.
You know, and the controls are the problem. I mean, the controls probably like 1970s vintage, if you were to go in there. So that's got to be upgraded.
Okay. Now, another piece of property that you're quite interested in, I think you own it, and that's what we call the Jones Building?
Right, Robert S. Jones Building.
And it used to be JNL2, I think it was? Mm-hmm. Okay, so SRDC owns that?
Correct.
And so the people down there have to pay you rent?
Correct.
Okay, so that's...
And we pay property taxes, as we do on JNL and Bryant's.
Yeah, I understand you have to pay taxes, but obviously that was an incubator to start with, right?
No, it's kind of. I mean, we gave the story of SRDC in Al Moulton earlier, and one of the first projects was rehabbing that building, because that wasn't necessarily tied in with all the Goldman stuff, because Goldman owned J&L and Bryant's and North Springfield Fellows. And for a long time, that was a money sink. SRDC really struggled financially as an organization because of what's now the Jones Center. So now it's turned around and it stands on its own.
Good.
So there are 3 companies in there: J&L Metrology, which is kind of the tie to J&L, and they're doing very well. It's kind of neat to see how the couple that own that have really resurrected that and are making new optical comparators. PCM Image Tech has always been strong, and they've had a good year. And M.E. Baker is bouncing back and doing some good things.
Well, now what's Baker? What do they do?
So they make, simply put, they make liquid process machines. So an example of them, they just completed a machine that embeds solar panels with a particular type of chemical they need to be solar panels. Yeah. But it's, we're from a town that makes machines to make things, so that's kind of a continuum from that.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear that. Now, when Black River Produce bought the old Ben & Jerry's plant in North Springfield.
Right.
And they were going to rehab it because it's in the paper. I'm only going by what was in the paper. And they're going to have some kind of a shop or opening there, a store of some kind that they're going to sell things. First of all, how's the progress coming on it? Have they got the building somewhat renovated so they can start doing things? Because I know there was an awful mess when they bought it. Because
well, that's the thing, and the town did. We sort of kind of take the town for granted in all this stuff, but the town has been extremely supportive of us and extremely supportive of making projects happen. So we need to understand that, and people need to understand that. Hopefully that's said. So that's an example that the Ben & Jerry's or Ellsworth building went through a tax sale, was owned by someone from out of state. They lost it at a tax sale, and the town ended up picking it back up. But we talked about copper theft. That's another building that got trashed by people ripping off the copper from inside. There also was a roof collapse. So that's even worse than, there was still a good shell of the building, but there's also a portion that was even worse than a shell. So Thankfully, Black River Produce needed, they've been expanding beyond just doing produce. They've gotten into seafoods, and now they're doing meats, which is what this building is for. So they worked with the town, made an arrangement, and they've put a significant amount of money into that building, which is, to answer your question, getting close to being ready to go. It will not be a store. It's a place to do meat processing. So cows, whatever, that are already butchered come in, and they will chop it up into different cuts of beef and stuff, and then distribute it out of there.
Sure. Okay, so they got to be well closed in, though, because the back.
Oh yeah, no, that's been done.
That's been done because the last time I was up there, that's how long ago I've been up there. The backside was all down. And
yeah, that's where the roof collapsed there a couple winters ago.
Yeah, so that's all done.
That's a good thing. And Black River, Black River is a success story. They've grown to the point where they bought the old Idle Knot property. They've expanded, as I talked about. Now they're getting into meats, and they're, again, you never maybe appreciate things within your community, but if you go from outside, that's a business that has incredible respect around the state of Vermont.
Sure it is, yeah. And they employ quite a few people.
Exactly. And they've just put a major, they're putting their money where their mouth is, not only in the Ben & Jerry's plant, but also this large solar array that's going up on the former Idle Knot property.
That's my next question. What is this solar project that the produce company is going to be doing up there?
Right, so that's, and I don't have my notes, so I'm winging this, but they've installed a large amount of solar panels. They've used Prudent Living out of Windsor, Vermont, to do the contracting on that. They are controllable remotely, and those are providing, I believe, electrical solar as opposed to thermal solar, and those are online maybe even as we speak. It was about to launch any day now.
Now that takes care of their building there. That's what this is for.
Right, and presumably, without knowing whatever details of whatever agreements they have, I'm guessing they have a net metering arrangement that takes care of their electrical needs for both that and the Ellsworth building.
Yeah, and similar to what IVEC had done up there.
Correct.
Yeah, same thing. Now let's talk about this biomass plant that people all over the town are talking about. What would you like to say about it at this time?
It's in the Act 248 process, so I want to respect that, and SRDC is a party to that process. So the North Springfield Sustainable Energy Project, it was about a year ago when the actual Act 248 permits were filed, and there have been some public meetings, as folks know, and they're currently, as I said, it's currently going through the 248 process, which will go into next year. We support the project for a number of reasons. The biggest piece for me personally is the thermal loop, which would provide below market at easily steam energy that would go around the industrial park and provide a resource for the businesses that are there, as well as for additional businesses we bring to the park. There also would be an additional amount that will be available for residents in that area, which I believe the Town Energy Committee is working with the project developers on sorting out exactly how that will happen. It's a $150 million investment. There's direct and indirect employment. Thermal loop is what's of importance to me because I just think that makes things grow and solidifies the employers we already have, which you always got to remember, it's easier to save a job than to try and get it back after you've lost it. And it's a huge impact on this community's grand list. So,
but they also are they're going to help the citizens of North Springfield with the changing of the old type wood stove.
Well, the wood stove change out, and Dan Ingold, who you've had on, you should speak about that more so than me. But we support the project and we respect the legal process that's going on, and we'll let that play out.
Okay. All right, now let's talk about the new sign that you're going to be putting up there.
Okay, so you've got a handy-dandy brochure. So
put it right up here and they can get a good picture.
So if you've ever been to the industrial park in North Springfield, many years ago, well, the history of the park was it was farmland that was bought in the 60s for fellows, ultimately, and then grew into an industrial park out of that. And so Precision Valley Development Corporation, which developed the park, had a wooden sign that was on the corner of Precision Drive and Main Street that was there until a few years ago, I guess it was. Time flies, but even when it was up, it was woefully outdated and inadequate. And there's a lot of people that go to that park and can't figure out, is Gelwin down here, is Gelwin over there, or is IVEC? Oh, IVEC's easy, it's right on the road. But so IVEC now owns that piece of property, and Mark Tanney from IVEC has been extremely generous and visionary with organizing a group of local businesses, Gurney Brothers, Vermont Timber Works, Woodbury's, and others I'm not missing, to put up a sign that will at the very least be a directional sign to help direct people to which business is on which road. But it also will have a granite base, and IVEX donating the granite from Barry. And on that will be logos from area businesses to, as Mark puts it, send a message that there is economic vitality, and that we care about the vitality of this park, we care about the economic vitality of the region, and we're making a statement with this. And within that granite base will be a time capsule where those that get on the base can put something to dig up long after you and I are gone. So again, I can't say enough about Mark and his leadership on this project. SRDC will be taking care of the sign. The funds that come into this go to us to go into a fund to take care of the sign, make sure it's updated and well cared for. You know, we've been pretty successful so far. I think there's 42 spots on the base, and we've sold a little more than half of them right now.
That's great.
There's also space on the ends. It goes like this long, and then the ends there are spaces where individuals can put their initials if they feel so inclined.
So the individuals can get involved in the sign.
Sure.
And how would they do that? Call you?
Call us is easiest.
Yeah, that's going to say call you.
885-3061.
885-3061 and talk to Bob.
And any of these things, you know, if people have questions, I'm pretty easy to find. You know, people stop me in the store or call or shoot me an email, and I'll talk about what I can talk about, and folks seem to understand, you know, where that line is where I can't go past. But
okay, we understand that. I've been that route before.
Sure. And we are on Facebook, and we do have a website, and we post quite a bit of stuff there too.
Now you talked to me a little about VTEL. Now what's going on here? So as hopefully folks know, VTEL received a significant amount of funding from mostly ERA funding to do broadband expansion around Vermont. VTEL has been visionary, and we get spoiled around here. We've had pretty good internet in Springfield for years, way ahead of everybody else. So again, we sort of take that for granted. There are parts in Vermont that don't have the kind of speed we've had, again, for years. But VTEL was really visionary in picking up what's called spectrum, or basically frequencies for things like the old analog television signals we used to get, like Channel 3, Channel 31. Yeah. Those are no longer used because everything's digital. What happens to that spectrum, those frequencies? Those are now being converted to cellular phones or other kinds of data transmission. VTEL years ago bought the licenses for a lot of this spectrum for Vermont. So as you think about, well, how are you going to get broadband to a state that's topographically challenged because of all the hills and mountains and stuff, and valleys? You can get to a lot more places with wireless for a more economical cost than you can running wire everywhere. So a long-winded answer to saying that they are moving forward on both of those fronts. Their funding allows them to put very high-capacity fiber within their core service area, which is us, as well as doing this wireless expansion around most of the state. So there has been a company that's been leasing space from us in the south end of Bryant's, the place we drive by with a fence, and you see those trucks. That company is nearing the end of its work. That was charged with running the fiber on the poles, or from hither and yon, and getting it to homes or businesses or buildings. So there's another company that's moved into town within the past couple of months that's now charged with connecting the buildings. The first one just got connected. It was Kelly Harrison's business up in North Springfield a couple weeks ago. So he's the first one to get connected. Wow.
And they're going to start going, I don't know which route they're taking, but eventually, pretty soon.
Every home.
Yeah, will be connected to this pretty high capacity fiber. So, and then the wireless will be rolling out next year, and I know they're doing some things with television signals. Basically, like cable or satellite, you can get television service from VTEL. It's pretty exciting.
Wow. I think they made great strides from what they used to be, the old telephone
absolutely. Company. But again, it's that vision, because they had the vision, and that's why they're able to pull this off. So it's kind of neat that a local company is having that kind of impact.
During our conversation too yesterday, you talked about $1 million that you received, to help out people from the Hurricane Irene, and of course that's strictly for businesses that you guys are doing. So how is that going? How long have you had the money, and have you had any response as far as helping businesses out?
Sure. So to backtrack a little bit, so what Puggy's referring to is that SRDC and our counterparts in Brattleboro the Regional Development Corporation there, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, partnered on an application for $1 million in community development block grant funds. Those are federal funds that come to the state from HUD, and because of Irene, the state got, I think, $21 million for Irene-related things through the Community Development Block Grant Program. Of that, $3 million was set aside for business recovery issues. We just got $1 million of that $3 million. So we just got notified last week, so we haven't signed the grant agreements or anything yet, so I don't have the money.
Okay.
But I'm getting it.
You're getting it.
And so the point is, there are businesses, not so much in Springfield per se, but certainly in other communities that are watching this, that did get nailed by Irene and are still feeling it. Whether it's the lost revenue from, say, a lodging institution that had a lousy foliage season or couldn't open because they were trashed because of Irene. And that's still affecting their bottom line now. So the point of the grant is to help those businesses that were impacted try and recover a little bit. It's not going to cure everything. No. It's not $1 million for one business. We expect it to be granted in probably $20,000 to $30,000 chunks. It will be very, very competitive. But when we were putting the grant together, and we've been working on this since October, actually September even, we sent out kind of a survey to businesses for what was what's called unmet need, or FEMA kicked in so much, you might have gotten loans for so much, but what did you need and what's that gap?
Right.
And between us and Windham County, it was $6.5 million. And that's legit. That's, we didn't just accept any answers. We vetted that a little bit. So again, $1 million isn't going to fix 6.5, but it helps.
Yeah.
So the application for that funding was posted on the Springfield Development website, which is springfielddevelopment.org. That was posted yesterday. If you go to the website, there's a tab up top that says, I think it says disaster recovery money or something like that. Click on that. There's a little blurb about what all this is, and there's the actual application you can download. There will be workshops, 2 of which will be at the Dean Center here in Springfield. I think January 10th and 28th, but again, the dates are on the website. Strongly urge you to go to those if you're interested, if your business was impacted by Irene and you think you're a candidate. We are granting out the money in 3 chunks, maybe more depending on how we do, but the first deadline would be the end of January, then there'll be another one end of February, end of March. Okay. And it will be a committee made up of a small committee of folks from this area and folks from the Brattleboro area that will be making these decisions on funding. So yeah, that's a good deed we did, and hopefully can make an impact to help some folks out around here.
That's great. And a lot of people can use the help.
Absolutely.
We were very fortunate. We didn't get hit hard here in Springfield.
Thank goodness for the dam.
Yeah. So we talked about a lot of things that SRDC is doing in Springfield, but how about some other towns that you're doing? What are you doing in other towns?
Well, and obviously what we just spoke about is something that would probably impact Chester, Cavendish, Windsor more so than Springfield.
Yeah.
Windsor's probably a town we've been visible in this year. SRDC built a facility in Windsor right next to Harpoon Brewery that houses Vermont Farmstead cheese and what's called the Sustainable Farmer, which is a retail store. That's been exciting because we got involved because making that project work on its own was not going to happen, and it was just close enough where it needed a little nudge, so we provided that. Since then, Farmstead Cheese has announced plans for 2 additional expansions at that site. So that's great.
Yeah.
If you go to that park, you'll also see there's a building there that looks kind of like a silo. That's on purpose because the company is American Crafted Spirits, and their first product is Silo Vodka. So that's a guy from Barnard who actually knew the Gurneys here in Springfield. Yeah. We've helped get that company going and try to make that project happen. I saw him this morning. They expect to be open around February 1st.
Oh, it's not open yet?
No, it's waiting for a special distillery, a piece of equipment to come from Germany. Huh. So that's en route. So that's 2 for the good guys, there, and happy to be involved in those things. Just by way of scale, though, because a criticism we'll get from people in Springfield is, well, why didn't those come to Springfield? Let's give some perspective. Those 2 projects combined, are about maybe 20% of the cost of 100 River Street.
20%.
So if I go to say Windsor, they'll say, why didn't you get 100 River Street to come here?
Right.
It's all good,
Yeah.
just trying to make things happen. But just it's funny how perspective works a little bit. Chester, most visible thing we did there probably was helping the Chester Andover Family Center. They've opened up a new location on 103 as you're going past the high school there, where the restaurant used to be on the right-hand side. They have been incredible. A lot of people come with ideas and kind of expect a handout. They work their tails off to get in position to make that happen, and we're happy to have played a role, but they did a great job, and the town of Chester should be really proud of them.
Wow. Now, have you done anything I can let know? Or,
well, we've got, I gotta be careful. I can't say if things we're involved in because it's confidential, but I think it's safe to say, and for the first time in my 7 years, we've had a project in every town, or every municipality this year. So, you think about what's going on with the economy and fiscal cliff and all this other stuff. More than not, companies are telling me that they're doing okay, and they're hiring maybe onesies, twosies, but they're hiring, and that the ship is starting to turn. And as we start to get more space available, because that's also sort of been the paradox in Springfield, you had big empty buildings but nowhere to put people, that's changing. So what do we want to put in these buildings, and how do we want to, as a community and a region, make that happen? Because you can't have a company come here, or you can't have a company expand if you don't have folks to work there. You can't have folks to work there if they aren't trained and have the skills to work there, or you can't attract people from outside to move here to work there if there are other reasons they may or may not want to move to a community or a region. So we all got to work together.
And do you see that happening?
We're getting there.
Okay.
And again, the town government gets a huge pat on the back and gets taken for granted. Because the select board and the town manager have been incredibly supportive of us, and we appreciate that, and we obviously appreciate the continued support from the people of Springfield and the other communities. Chester and Windsor also contribute significant funding.
So if you could look in your crystal ball again there, Bob, what do you see in the future, some future things happening, might happen or could happen that you'd like to talk about?
We already spoke about the biomass project. We're excited about that and the potential that means for that part of the community. I think that's very exciting. And at some point, J&L will happen. At some point, Bryant's will happen. Bryant's may happen before J&L, but at some point, those will happen. So what do you want in those spaces? And I'm being intentionally vague because you want to leave it open. I can tell you what they won't be. They won't be Walmart, and they won't be a warehouse that employs 2 or 3 people, if I have anything to do about it. It's too important to have those be contributing pieces of property.
But you envision that you'd like to see?
Well, it's not for me to be prescriptive about it. They need to be places where people can work and make a decent living. And they need to contribute positively to the community. It's going to be such a bear to get them to the point where they're occupiable. That's my focus at the moment.
All right. Now, you said you're the chairman on the River Valley Technical Center board. Is the SRDC involved at all in the tech center? Are they helping out or trying to do things with the tech center?
Well, so we spoke a moment ago about that kind of circle, and you can't have employers without having employees. You can't have employees unless they have the skills and training. And so obviously that means the River Valley Tech Center is a priority for SRDC, whether it was whoever's in my chair now or me in this case. So I happen to be the chair of the board right now, but that's, regardless of that official position, I and we would be heavily involved in the tech center. So, and hopefully have been supported for a number of years. We try to provide that linkage between what's going on and what we're hearing from employers to what is being offered at the tech center, and what's good, what's bad, what needs to be tweaked, making sure there's engagement between the employers and the instructors there, making sure there's a vibrant adult education program, which Kelly Broker Campbell is doing a great job with right now. I also co-chair the Workforce Investment Board, which is another piece of that puzzle. Again, trying to bridge that. Employers need employees, people need jobs. How do you make those things happen?
Are you involved at all in trying to encourage young people to come to the tech center?
Oh, sure. And tech center enrollment's actually up this year.
It is. Last I knew, it was only about 290.
Yeah, it's about close to 300 now.
Good.
we could spend hours talking about tech ed in the state and how it's governed and the restrictions.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, one of my pet peeves is that, you know, we're taping this in Springfield High School. SAPA is within Springfield High School.
Right.
For a kid to go from this building just down the hall to the tech center is hard. And it's stupid. And it's not the fault of the tech center or Springfield High School. It's the way the regulations work about funding.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. We got to find a way to sort that out. But there's also a really exciting program the tech center has kind of piloted called Vermont Virtual Learning Collaborative.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Jeff Renard.
Yeah.
And that's really neat. And trying to find a way to use the internet and technology to maybe more efficiently deliver forms of education, not just in this area, but around the state. And that he's got a tiger by the tail with that.
So you think that that program has really taken off?
Oh yeah, that's a home run, and that's constrained now by state regulations and things like that. So we got to sort that through. So in answer to your question, we obviously promote tech ed. We want to support technical education and want to be active in and out of the region on trying to figure out how to expose as many youth as possible, and not just juniors and seniors in high school, which is the traditional tech ed model, to the different programs and offerings that are available here. So it's an ongoing thing.
Okay. So let me ask you the last question here. We talked about a lot of things here, Bob. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to have the citizens out there know what SRDC is involved with or doing or is encouraging? Or?
Well, I mean, I guess let's use 100 River Street or Old Fellows as an example. We drive by things every day. People drive by J&L and Bryant's every day. And there's a perception that those are like that because no one wants to come here. And hopefully, if I've made any sense at all, there's an understanding that that's not the case. Both J&L and Bryant's would be occupied like that if they were usable.
Yep.
It's getting past all the stuff.
Right.
And we spoke about J&L at length. It's a flat piece of property on a 4-lane highway near an interstate.
Yeah. Oh,
So 100 River Street, as it's now known, is sort of a template for what's going to go on at the other buildings. It's a brownfield. It's historic. It's a monster. How do you piece those elements together? Because those are going to be the same things at J&L and Bryant's, and how do you find a way to make them work? And again, let's think positively. You've seen the transformation of that facility. Eventually we'll get to the other guys and all the small stuff in between. What do we want to be and how do we make it happen? And let's find ways to be positive about making things happen rather than tearing things down because of whatever reason.
Right.
It's a lot easier, it's a lot harder to be positive than negative.
But you can see the trend turning from what we call gloom and doom for quite a while to now we can see something happening.
Sure.
And people are going to be actually enthusiastic when the things all come together, as you say.
And it's a puzzle. And there's still pieces missing. But yes, the ship has turned.
That's good. It's good to hear that. And I want to thank you, Bob, for coming on Puggy's Corner. And I want to thank you, citizens, for watching Puggy's Corner. If you have any questions about what SRDC is involved with or doing or anything at all about you want to know about SRDC, don't hesitate to call Bob Flint at 885-3061. And I know that you'll gladly talk to him and you'll give him as best you can the answers to the questions you're asking.
Sure.
Not all the time can you go in depth, but we understand
Right.
you won't throw them away either.
Absolutely. No, happy to talk to anybody. And again, like us on Facebook, website springfielddevelopment.org, and appreciate the opportunity to come and talk.
Okay. Well, thank you, citizens, for watching Puggy's Corner.